And just a couple little notes. Our recordings go up on secularrecoverygroup.org. It should be posted by the end of the day, thanks to Courtney. And one little note, just want to let any new people know, if you're new to this meeting, we do have a beginners meeting that's on Tuesday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern time, I believe, but I'm going to place some information in the chat later on about meetings and other cool stuff coming up. So anyway, all right, that is all. Now I will introduce our speaker. We have someone today from my home group here in Jersey City, and I'm very curious to hear his story. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce Matt.
Hey everyone, my name's Matt. I'm an addict and alcoholic. Hey Bridget, thank you so much for the invite. Yeah, no, it's great to be here. You said 20, 30 minutes? Somewhere in there? Okay, cool. I first came into traditional AA in 2016. And last April, I would have been coming up on 5 years, but I had a prolonged relapse, and now I am, I think, in the 5-month mark, coming back. Thank you. But yeah, we'll get more to that later. So anyway, I'll give you a little background. So I grew up in New Jersey, in a suburban town in New Jersey. Grew up with a pretty normal life. Younger sister, parents are married, and I know it's a gross way to put it, but upper middle class. So I wanted for nothing. And later realized I didn't appreciate what I had either. I took it for granted. Yeah, on the outside everything was fine, but as long as I could remember, 3, 4 years old, I was always anxious, and it manifested in pretty extreme ways. I didn't know at the time, but when I was younger, like first play dates, I'd get this feeling that I was going to have a heart attack and die, and later realized like it was like panic attacks. But Yeah, so it manifested as far as hypochondria, a lot of rationalizations and a lot of narratives I would create on top of just the inability to feel okay. um, and but that's just the way I experienced the world. There was like no other understanding of like what other people are like, or um, the potential of like a subjective experience. It was just like, oh, this is life. um, and I did okay in school. I struggled socially. I struggled academically. I would be later diagnosed with ADHD. Um, but all these things kind of like overlap as far as anxiety, ADHD, um, and yeah, I went to therapists when I was very young, but it was talk therapy, and it seemed like I wasn't be able to make much ground on it. I didn't understand why I was there. I didn't understand the concept of therapy, and it's very hard for a little kid to like understand like what it is to get better or whatever. So if I wasn't kind of uh, I maybe there was progress made there, but I have no real recollection of it. Um, and so anyway, uh, I my experience with drinking and stimulant abuse, medication abuse, that's like my main thing. Um, Drinking didn't come till like after high school, and stimulant abuse didn't come till after college. Um, I, you know, I like I said, academically things were somewhat difficult. If it was something I didn't care about, didn't I didn't focus on it. I couldn't focus on it. I had the inability to focus on anything I didn't care about. And at 22, after I graduated from college, literally the summer graduating from college, I started being a therapist, and I was prescribed ADHD medication for the first time, and that was a eureka. It was like I felt like for the first time I was able to focus and actually take in what people were saying, and not just putting on this mask of like, you know, trying to play the game and try to like present myself as if everything was okay. That I was actually like honed in. Um, and and then you know drinking throughout college, and it was problematic drinking, but I in in the context of college and what other people were doing and whatever, it just seemed like it fit in. It didn't seem like it was um, the exception, or you know. Um, so anyway, so while I was you know, diagnosed with ADHD and starting to take medication right after college, I, for the past 6 years prior, since I was 16, I had found out that my father was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. And this was kind of like a family secret. My sister didn't find out till a few years later. Um, but his symptoms were getting worse and worse, and uh, the uh, the uh, the whatever the financial security that we found in my family had become non-existent. I moved back from college. I was at home trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life, and uh, my dad was getting more and more. His symptoms were becoming more and more present, and it was harder, more difficult for him to function. And eventually, he had to close down his business. And it was just this compounding stress of, excuse me, of his illness, my mom's frustration and anger at the situation, and then that sometimes manifested at being angry at him, um, and then just like you know, cars repossessed, home going to be a lien on the house, you know, just everything, um, and I had become I mean, to lack a better term, I'd become paralyzed by the situation. I was so uncomfortable and anxious. I couldn't function. I became agoraphobic. It was hard for me to leave the house. Um, but this medication, this stimulant medication, like in that moment saved my life. It gave me strength that I just didn't have internally to take care of this situation. And eventually, I got some work and I moved out. And about 8 months after I moved out, when I was in 2013, when I was 24, my father committed suicide, and uh, there were several attempts prior to that I was privy to, and frankly, earlier on in my recovery in these rooms, a lot of my qualification would be about my dad's Parkinson's for about 25 minutes. And because I still am living in trauma, but I really, I really didn't know how to deal with it. Um, you know, looking back, I emotionally didn't know how to deal with it. and felt very trapped by it still, and very, all the things remorse. Um, so, he was very sick. We were losing everything, and he, you know, it was a terrible thing, and he was, very depressed, and and he also he had a life insurance policy, and older life insurance policies, I guess, didn't have a clause for suicide, and so he knew that if he did this, his family would be taken care of. So it was a combination of things, um, and as much as we tried to convince him otherwise, eventually he just decided he didn't want to be here anymore. So, um, for the next few years, I was working. I was living in New York, um, uh, and with not dealing with the pain, I was my tolerance was going up, and the medication intake was going up, and the drinking was going up. And I work in freelance, so I don't have a 9 to 5. So I was accountable to no one, and I would go out, you know, after hours places, whatever, and be out on the weekdays till like 7 in the morning, and eventually, uh, drug use was going up, drinking was going up, and my bank account was going down, and my ambitions were going down, and work ethic was going down. All these things until, um, you know, uh, the medication was just keeping me even, but I had no. Um, all my ambition had been gone, had left, and I was just completely broke, and and lost, and I kept, burning bridges, with work and situations, and so I had to sublet my apartment, and I moved back with my at 26, moved back with my mom in New Jersey to try to figure out like what the hell I was going to do. And when I was with my mom, uh, she got into an accident. She was okay, but she physically, she was injured and had a bunch of broken bones and ribs, and she had to go inpatient to a physical rehabilitation center called Kessler Institute in New Jersey. And one day, as I was leaving, I think it was like a Friday, uh, I was leaving, visiting hours were over. I was leaving my mom in this inpatient facility, and I was walking down, and I'm in this corridor, and I look to the side, and I just see like a sliver into this room, and it's like what I would later know is a percolator, but a coffee maker, and a couple people with coffee cups and talking, and I kept walking. I was like, oh, I bet that's like AA or one of those things, which I made that connection, but it had nothing to do with me. Like it was just like, oh, I was able to identify that, and like kept walking. I didn't have anyone in my family, the gene or whatever, the disease doesn't run in my family. My mom doesn't have it, my sister doesn't have it, and for as sick as my father was, he never had any substance issues. So what I knew about it was like, you know, growing up and being like, oh, the neighbor's an alcoholic, or like media or TV, but I had no direct connection to it. So I was like, oh, that's probably AA, and like I looked it up somehow on Google, and it was like, oh, that is AA, and then forgot about it for a few weeks. And then as I was just home ruminating, lost, didn't know what I was doing, uh, out of almost just boredom and loneliness, not out of desperation, but I went to see this meeting, see what the deal was. Uh, and I went in, and for like after like the first, I sat down. There was like 5 people in the room. guy gave me the intergroup, meeting list. They all wrote their numbers on the back. The guy was talking to me. His name was Gene. Yeah, that's funny. Gene. 6 years later. And yeah, I was the youngest person in that group by 40 years, but there were certain universal things that they were saying, and just the engagement and how they were just kind of just really they really were focused on me, and they really were listening, and it really felt like, okay, there might be something here. I didn't have an aversion. It wasn't particularly gaudy. It wasn't I don't believe they did the Lord's Prayer at the end of that meeting. And I also come from a very secular background. I mean, but more indifference. We didn't have religion really, and so I kind of took what I wanted and left the rest behind or whatever. So, but at this time, I realized I had to stop using this medication. I had tried. I'm sorry that this is all convoluted, but I had tried in the years leading up to that for a couple of years. I knew I had a problem with the medication, and there would be and the drinking, and I knew I would go through different ways of trying to deal with it. I would do crazy treatments and just insane treatments, like ice therapy and sauna and insane amounts of cardio and gym, and then go to the gym, and got really into meditation after my father passed away. And it was all to curb the side effects of stimulant abuse and drinking and everything. So much so that my days just became about managing the side effects and not about living life in any way whatsoever. It would be I would do all these things in my day to then, if I went out with people, I could save face or be on for an hour and a half to create the illusion that I was okay. So anyway, so I had tried a bunch of ways of trying to get off stuff, and it would last for I would meditate I went through a big kick where I was meditating tons, and I was free of it, but I had no, what I would later realize, it was I had no community. I was doing this alone. I had no one to reach out to. So all I was trying to do with the meditation was kind of spiritually bypass living and acknowledging feelings and acknowledging my problem and connecting with others. And so it seemed like this thing would work because I would be, accountable and talk to others and be involved in, this community. And I also really bought into, I looked at the steps, and I didn't have a background with religion, so I couldn't wrap my head around what the God stuff was about, but I was all right, I'll do the mental gymnastics to try to figure it out. But the 11th step, I was so gung-ho about meditation that I was you got me, cool, we'll do that. And so I took a year. I got sober in New Jersey, moved back into my apartment in New York, got a sober job, which wasn't really a sober job; it was just a job. But I called it a sober job. I never got it. I didn't get a new sponsor, and I would go to meetings, but I didn't transition into a Manhattan community of AA. I went to some stuff, and my addiction, whatever, went all into my work. I would work on weekends. I would do that, and I would go to very few meetings, and I didn't relapse, but my life was completely unmanageable, and yeah, I left my job. I was working freelance again, but I just wasn't making enough money to live or support that, and I was miserable. And so I moved to where I am now, Jersey City, and this was like 3 or 4 years ago, I guess. And I was lost for a really long time. Uh, I was sober, but I felt without doing a program, without answers, I was just lost, and I felt it was like the worst times here are were way more were more difficult than uh, not being sober and not and not being here because I don't know. I know people say like just having gratitude that at least today you're sober, um, which which works, but it doesn't work as like a thing of gratitude every single day if you're stagnant for like or lost for a year and a half and miserable. I needed something more than just having gratitude that I'm sober. I and yeah, eventually work came through it it allowed me to move out of this terrible living situation that I was in, and I started making friends. In Jersey City, we have a clubhouse. It's called like Barrow Mansion, uh, and there's a bunch of things that go on there. But then there's meetings, like 3 times a day, 7 days a week there, and and there's a huge community there. And I started going there, and I started connecting with people, and I got a new sponsor, and I started doing step work, and it was all well and good. But eventually, I uh, I don't know. I thought I was getting more work, and I had friends, and the craziness of like no one will ever like me for me, and that I have so many faults, and what do I have to offer other people? Came back in my head, and I thought I could control it, and so I decided back in like September, October, um, that I'll take ADHD stimulant medication, but I won't. I'll take a low amount and I'll do it under a doctor's supervision, and but it's my business, and I'll be responsible this time. And that lasted. It didn't last at all, and it never existed. From the second I put that pill in my mouth, the obsession came back, and I mean, it was so insane. It's such a crazy feeling to be off of something for so long, and then take one thing, and then immediately come back to that obsession. Um, and uh, yeah, I would get like a 30-day supply of medication, and I would run through it in 7 days. And I was just up and down and up and down. And at this time, had I was GSR of a group, was chairing another group. I met my amazing girlfriend in this program, and and there was too much at stake in my mind to come forward and say that I had relapsed, and that I had relapsed and had not been honest about it. And I for like whatever it was, 8 months or seven, whatever it was, um, I was living uh, just this deceitful life. I compartmentalized it so I wasn't tortured by it constantly, but I kept trying to get off of it, but I just couldn't do it. I couldn't do it silently, but I just thought everyone would walk away from me. I know now it seems silly, but I thought everyone would walk away from me. And so one day I was too tired, uh, and and sh- uh, um, oh, I'm running up at on time. All right, well let me just. I'm good. Okay, okay. All right, because Bridget knows I still have to get to the other thing, the recent thing. Uh, so I sorry. Um, So one day, yeah, I was just exhausted. I had told myself a million times I was going to come forward, like I had to, and then this one day I was just depleted and didn't have the energy to do it anymore. And I called my sponsor. He didn't pick up, and then I called my roommate, who's also in the program. He picked up. He said he was on his way home, and I was like, okay. And you could tell by the my voice that something was up. And so I came back home, went into the kitchen, and just broke down crying and like asked for forgiveness and said I'm so sorry, blah blah blah, and just without hesitation was just like, it's okay, I'm here for you. And then my sponsor called and I said the same thing, and he was like, it's okay, I'm here for you. um the day count, it's not the end of the world. You still have all of your experiences, insight, wisdom. Prior to that, day count isn't everything. Um, and then I was like, they're like, you should call your. Thank you, Bridget. And then they were like, you should call your girlfriend. Just call her. Just tell her. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, I'll call her, and then she'll break up with me. But I mean, rightfully so. So. And I called and I told her, and it wasn't like even a pause. The immediate thing was, where are you? I was like, I'm home. And she's like, all right, I'm coming right to you. And my roommate and my girlfriend, luckily the place I was mentioning, Barrow Mansion's like 4 blocks away from where I live. And it was like 7 o'clock, and we went to a 7:30 meeting on a Thursday, I believe. And I went in there and looked around, saw a lot of people I know, a lot of people, and they flanked me. They were both like right next to me, and I just, raised my hand and said, I have one day back. Um, and yeah, I called my close friends who were in the program. I went over to um, each and one of their homes. I wanted to do it in person and told them what had happened. And every single person embraced me and listened and was just concerned. Just concerned. And I now, but also immediately after that, had never felt closer to people. I never felt, um, that day I felt gratitude or those days had gratitude. I could easily have gratitude for being sober. um, but, and having those friends and having that. And so, yeah, so since then, it's been difficult. I was having a lot of cravings the first like month, 2 months, and emotional regulation issues. Um, uh, but I did a 90 in 90. I probably did more than 90 in 90, the first 90 days, which is the first time I ever did that. I had um, done. I was coffee maker for the first time. I had done all the other positions, but I never did coffee. uh, and and so yeah, I realized that being humbled and being open is not the same as being pathetic. I felt by letting my guard down and really learning to take things in that it wouldn't be pathetic or emasculating or whatever anxiety things go on, or fear-based things go on. And I'll wrap up with this just a couple of minutes. It feels weird to do this in an abbreviated sense because it is a big thing, but About 6 months into the program, I'll just do this quickly. So my mom was married to my father for 40 years, and then after they met as kids, and then afterwards, my mom uh, was single for a few years, figuring things out, and she started dating, and then she got into a relationship with this man named Robert. And uh, about a year into them being in a relationship, he was diagnosed with lung cancer. And just who my mom is, and I guess who we are, it's like she couldn't live with herself if she walked away from this person, even though it was terrible. And he said to her, I understand, he knew the context of my dad and everything, and like, how much can one woman take? But she stood by. And so they lived together, they were together, and he was pretty much symptom free for like 4.5, 5 years. Um, and he passed away 2 weeks ago. Um, uh, and uh, knowing my mom and I have always had a tumultuous relationship, and me and my sister were just very concerned for my mom. My mom is very, very high functioning, but she had a screwed up childhood. She had bad parents, and she never. So, as competent, intelligent, capable, all these things she is, um, there's a lot of emotional work that hadn't been done, and it would lead to anger fits and blow-ups and whatever. And me and my sister were like, once Robert's gone, there's going to be this hole there, and we know the cycle of how things work with my mom. And he passed away. She was okay. She went through like the stages. She's been going through the stages of grief, and she hit anger, and a week and a half ago. It got bad. It was really bad, um, and I don't know. I mean, I know how, but almost just instinctually, I showed up, and since then, I've gotten feedback from her, and this is a weird way of saying it, but feedback from her and my sister. Um, and my sister is uh, not like, I mean, she's not like me. She's like me, but she's not like me at all. She's 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 successful, and she's very high functioning too. So my sister's the one who usually shows up and whatever. But I've gotten feedback from both of them saying like, it was perfect. Oh my God, what did you say? My sister asking me about my mom, blah blah blah. My mom really and I really connected, and um, I hadn't told her about this relapse, and I told her after we talked about her stuff, and she totally accepted it. And it was like I had never felt that close to my mom ever. Like even after my father died, it was just like there were still barriers. And the only thing I can account for, other than like being my mother's son, so I know what she's going through because it's the way my mind works too, is the community I have, the program, the friends I have, um, that it just must be so baked into my mind that it was just this. It didn't feel like I was navigating or like it didn't feel like I was playing a game of chess. It was so it was exhausting, but it was so obvious the things to say. Um, and yeah, I mean, without this program, without the people in this program, without doing things outside this program, like I said, meditation, I'm still very much into, and exercise and all these things, I wouldn't be able to be there for her. I wouldn't be able to be there for anyone. Um, and yeah, you know, there's still a road ahead. She still needs to get help, and I think she's willing to get help. Um, and she has the means to get help, so it's not an issue of that. Um, but yeah, it's good to be able to be there for people. Um, and yeah, it's still early in my journey. I still feel very. I'm perpetually chronically uncomfortable, but but it's manageable. Um, and I'm learning that with all those faults that I see of myself, people still like, for the most part, to be around with me as long as I'm taking care of myself. So I don't know. It's still a process, but I think I'm coming to around to starting to somewhat like myself. But I don't want to get carried away. Anyway, thanks so much for letting me share.
Thank you, Matt.